Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Hello, Lana. Welcome to our today's lesson, History and Government. The topic is Establishment of Colonial Rule in Kenya. We are learning how the British instituted their rule in the territory of Kenya. And in today's lesson, we are going to further our learning on the response of the Kenyan communities towards the establishment of colonial rule. We started by asking ourselves what were the different responses that were exhibited by the Kenyan societies or the Kenyan people. And as I mentioned earlier, there were three ways or three responses that the people of Kenya used or brought against the British. The first one was resistance. They totally resisted the incoming of the British. The other one was collaboration. The other response was mixed reaction. That is a mixture of resistance and collaboration. And we started by looking at the resistance in our previous lessons. We studied the Nandi resistance, and also in our last lesson, we started the second community, which is the Agiryama. Agiryama resistance. That is what we are studying. And in our last lesson, we were able to learn about the cause of the Agiryama resistance, how they started to resist the British, and the cause of their resistance, how they fought against the British, and the different activities that they undertook as part of the resistance. And remember, I mentioned that their resistance started by them boycotting or refusing to offer their labor in the plantations that had been established by the British. And then also they were led by very influential leaders, that is Mekatilili Wamenza, together with the other leaders. And also they stood up to fight against the British when their shrines were defiled, and when the British refused to listen to their grievances. So in our today's lesson, we are going to learn about the causes. Today we are going to learn about the causes. That is what we are going to learn about, the causes of the resistance, the causes of the Agiryama resistance. That is what we are going to be learning in our today's lesson, the causes of the Agiryama resistance. What sparked up, what influenced them into fighting against the British. The first reason or the first cause for them to fight against the British was the forced labor. Forced labor that was instituted by the British. So the British were forcing them to work in the cotton farms, in the cotton plantations that they had established at the coast. So together with the rubber plantation. So they were forcing the Agiryama to give their labor, to give their manual labor into these plantations, and the Agiryama refused to be part of that. Number two, the next reason why they fought against, or they decided to resist, was because of the taxation that had been instituted by the British. So the British required that each and every able-bodied person, able-bodied men, were supposed to give taxes, to pay taxes. It was supposed to be paid in cash. It was supposed to be paid in cash. So this taxation really made the Agiryama people very angry, because they are paying tax because of existing. Just because you are well built and you have strength and you have grown, you are mature, you are supposed to pay tax by just the fact that you are there and you are a grown-up man. So that made the people very angry, and they decided to resist the British rule. Taxation had also been imposed on them, so that they could be forced to go and work in the cotton farms, so that after you have worked in the cotton farm, you are paid a few rupees, which in turn you are supposed to give to the British government as tax. So that angered the people and made them very angry. The next reason that or factor that made the Agiryama people to resist the British rule was conscription. Conscription into the army. Conscription into the army. They were forcing the men to join the army of the British in as part of law enforcers. So these made them to become angry. They were also being used by the British to go and participate in the world wars. So they could see the suffering of the young men, and this made them to rise up in arms against the British. The next reason is that they lost their trade. That is number 4, loss of trade. Remember, as we were discussing the cause of the resistance, we mentioned that I mentioned that the Agiryama people were active people in trade. They traded with their neighbors. They traded with other coastal communities. So this was a special trade or a special industry that was bringing them income. So with the coming of the British, they abolished that trade. Remember, they were engaging in ivory. They were engaging in ivory, the sale of ivory at the coast, which was very popular at that time because it had very high market in the Asian part of the world. So ivory was very common there, and it was lucrative business for them. Apart from ivory, they were also engaged in tembo, that is the coconut brew. They brewed that tembo and they could sell that. So that made the people, now that they could no longer brew the tembo, which is made from coconut, right? This is made from coconut. So because of that, resistance had to be made against the British. Because now, remember, these are traditional ways that the Agiryama had been used to. Now, the British are stopping them from continuing with their activities. So this made the Agiryama people very unhappy and very unsettled, and they decided to resist and fight against the British. Apart from that, they wanted to retain their traditional power. The people wanted to retain their traditional power. Remember, they had their own traditional leaders. I mentioned Mekatilili Menza was one female leader that was leading them. So the traditional people did not want to lose the traditional power that they had. They had their own leaders, they had their own rulers. So with the coming of the British, that meant that now the colonial officials were going to take control. The colonial officials were now supposed to take control. This made the Agiryama people very angry because they could now see their independence is going away. So they wanted to retain their independence and autonomy as a community. They wanted to lead themselves as they desired because the headmen or the traditional rulers understood the requirements. They understood the belief system of the Agiryama as opposed to the colonial officials who are just coming to make sure that the interests of the European have been taken care of. And then lastly, the British disregarded. There was disregard of traditional culture. Disregard of traditional culture by the British. So the British demolished. They demolished the kayas. The kaya that was very essential in the lives of the Agiryama. These were shrines. The kayas, they had shrines where they could go and offer sacrifices and make their prayers. So when the British demolished them, this made the Agiryama people very angry because they saw that their religion has been despised. Their belief system has been disrespected. Apart from that, the British were involved in raping the women. So this disheartened or made the Agiryama people very angry, and they could no longer continue to put or to go with their activities as normal. So they had to go and resist against the British. So these are the reasons or the major reasons why the Agiryama people resisted the colonial rule. I've said number one, that is they had forced labor. Number two, there was taxation upon the people, and then they were forced to be conscripted into the army, that is to go into the World War and support the British. And then there was laws of trade. The trade activities were being interfered with by the British, and they also wanted to retain their traditional leaders. And lastly, the traditional culture was being disrespected by the British. So as we come towards the end, let us now look at the results or the consequences, the results of the Agiryama resistance. What were the results of their resistance? As similar to the other resistance that we studied in Nandi, there was also loss of life. A lot of lives were lost in the course of the resistance. Many people died as they resisted the British rule. Apart from that, there was massive destruction of property. Massive destruction of property. And then also they lost their independence. That is another consequence or result of them resisting the British rule. And then their leaders, some of their leaders Some of their leaders were deported. Some of their leaders were deported. Remember, we mentioned Mekatilili Menza was deported, and Wanje were deported to Kisii because of leading the society in resistance against the British. Then, apart from that, they were displaced. They were displaced from their land to pave way for the plantations. So most of the Agiryama people were pushed into reserves to give way for the British plantations. Apart from that, number 6, the next result of the Agiryama, that is number 6, the position of women. The position of women was elevated. So the activity of Mekatilili Menza as the leader of the Agiryama elevated the position of women as they fought for the rights of the African people. So the women were motivated to come up and take leadership positions. So they could be able to fight against the inhumane treatment by the British. Some of them who were raping the women, right? Because of the activities of Mekatilili Menza, it motivated the women to also come and fight against the British. And then lastly, the Agiryama lost their land, what we also refer to as land alienation. So their land was taken away and now was used by the British to establish plantations, that is the cotton and rubber. And then lastly, one that I had not mentioned, the economic activities. Their economic activities were disrupted. Their economic activities were disrupted. So the activities of the Agiryama, that is trading, those who are farming, were now disrupted because there was now a new way of life introduced by the British. So, my dear learner, what have we learned today? Today we have learned about the causes of the Agiryama resistance, and number 2, we have learned about the consequences of their resistance against the British. Now, as we end our lesson, allow me to give you now an assignment. Allow me to give you an assignment for you to do at home. Questions, and the questions are: number 1, discuss the causes of the Agiryama resistance. And then number 2, outline the consequences of the Agiryama resistance. Number 1, discuss the causes of the Agiriama resistance, and number 2, outline the consequences of the Agiriama resistance. And that, my dear learner, now we have come to the end of our history and government lesson today. Bye-bye until the next time.